You can see Sean at your travels. Pardon me? Okay. Going by this clock, we still have a minute and a half, so please bear with us. Well, ladies and gentlemen, once again, good afternoon and welcome to everyone. My name is Ron Osika. I'm the Mayor of Fort Qu'Appelle and the Director for the Central Region of SUMA. The session that you're attending here will be recorded and videotaped as well. So if you have questions or comments, please use a microphone, speak into it, tell us your name, where you're from, and so people that down the road may have an opportunity to listen or view the videotape and the recordings. I want to acknowledge, first of all, the Saskatchewan Parks and Recreation Association as the session sponsors. And I also would like to express appreciation to AECOM, an engineering firm that has sponsored the refreshment break. Mr. Powell is here, the President of Saskatchewan Parks Recreation Association, who will be introducing the speakers for this afternoon. And but what I would like to do, just in advance of this, is introduce one of the speakers who is also a member of SUMA and works on our behalf in assisting us with policies, decision makings, and I'm very proud to have him as an associate. His name is Sean McEachran. He's a Director of Policy and Communications for the Saskatchewan Urban Municipalities Association. Sean became Director of Policy and Communications in March 2013. Previously, Sean served as SUMA's Senior Policy Advisor. He has been with SUMA since 2006. And before joining SUMA, Sean spent 3 years as a special assistant to the former Federal Minister of Finance, the Honourable Ralph Goodale. Sean holds a Bachelor of Education degree from the University of Regina. In his time here, you've probably engaged with Sean in one of his various policy files. He has handled the Public Safety File, the Health File, SAMA, Asset Management File, Infrastructure, and others, and we're very pleased that Sean is part of our SUMA team. He has experience at board governance and bylaw review and development. So at this time, I'd ask Mr. Powell to join me here and introduce the speakers, the other speakers, and please enjoy your session, ask questions, and this is very important to a lot of us in rural Saskatchewan, where we rely on cooperation amongst our other jurisdictions, surrounding jurisdictions and neighbors to make things happen. So, thank you.
Thanks very much, Ron. Two remaining speakers to introduce. The first one is Harvey Linen. Harvey is president of H.G. Linen Associates, a Saskatchewan consulting firm that specializes in planning, organizational development, training, research, communications, strategy, and public consultations. For more than 20 years, the firm has provided services to the public sector at all levels, as well as the private sector and non-government organizations. Harvey has conducted strategic planning for a number of municipalities, as well as municipal studies on topics as varied as economic development, human resources, and immigration. Sorry, I got a little throat thing going here. Our final speaker for this round will be Norm Campbell. Norm is the Chief Executive Officer of SPRA. Norm has been involved in the recreation field for over 35 years. He started his career with the City of Moose Jaw as a recreation programmer, continued to work with the city's Parks and Recreation Department in various capacities, including facilities supervisor, capital project coordinator, and recreation director. In 2000, Norm was hired as the Chief Executive Officer of the Saskatchewan Parks and Recreation Association. At a national level, Norm has represented Saskatchewan at the Canadian Recreation Facilities Council and is currently on the board of the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association. Norm also sits as a member of the writing team that is drafting the Pathways to Wellbeing, which is a framework for recreation in Canada. So how it's going to work today is excuse me, Harvey's going to come up and talk a little bit about the research that has been put behind this project or connects with this project. And then Sean's going to come up and speak about some of the activities and the importance from a SUMA perspective. And then finally, Norm is going to come up with some specific examples and strategies of what's exactly going on in our province today. So we'll get these guys going right away here.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Harvey Lennon, and my role here was that my firm was contracted to develop the guide that we're going to be talking about today. And as I'll explain to you in a moment, although our job was to lead that process, we worked throughout very, very closely with SUMA and SPRA and municipalities from around the province in this process. Let me get hold of the device here. This is what we are talking about. This document, it looks like this. You don't have one yet, but when the trade show opens tomorrow, I encourage you to go down to the SPRA booth below us and get a copy of this and go through it. This is what we're going to be talking about today, and we'll walk you through the background, what's in it, and some of the ways that you can apply it and other information as you look at the subject. And the subject matter is intermunicipal collaboration on recreation. So let me talk to you a little bit about the project itself, sort of the overview of it. SUMA and SPRA call this a progressive partnership, and it really is. If there's an example of a progressive partnership, this is it. Very early, both associations identified the need for things to happen in recreation through collaboration between municipalities, rurals and urbans. And a year ago at the conventions for both associations, this was an important topic on the agenda. I suspect some of you in the room today were engaged in workshops on that topic at one or both of those conventions. That really kicked off the joint funding of this project. Then the need was identified. The joint funding from both associations went into it, made the project possible, and there was very strong joint management through that process. A joint management team made up of both of the associations were looking after the project from start to finish, but not just sort of overseeing it, but very much engaged and involved in the project. We'll talk a little bit about that. This is the sort of the program components that went through the development of the guide that we're going to talk about today. First, we did some research. The research there was to assess the kind of activity and the challenges that municipalities were facing. What was happening, what could be learned from that, what were the challenges that were being faced, what were the experiences that were going on in Saskatchewan's municipalities that we could learn from. Out of that research, I'll talk about that research in a minute, what we learned from it, but what we learned from it then went into the guide, into the shape and the content of the guide to assist. So we created that guide, and the purpose of that guide is to assist municipalities, and it was written specifically so that elected leaders within municipalities, as well as the professional recreation staff within municipalities, could both use this guide and apply it to develop collaboration on recreation files. Throughout that process, as we developed it over the course of the months, there was ongoing testing, and we'll talk a little bit about that, a formalized structure for constantly referring our ideas out and getting new information in, and as the guide began to be written and to be developed, there was a constant back and forth of testing of the document. So the document you have today has been gone through by very many people over the course of its development through the course of 2014 to get to the shape that it's been in. It has had an awful lot of feedback into it, and we appreciate the work that so many people have put in. Let's talk just really quickly about the research that we did. We really did three rounds of activity, 2 rounds of formal research. The first round was identifying approximately 30 municipalities where there seemed to be experience of collaboration on the recreation file of some sort. We went out and did one-on-one interviews with each of those municipalities. From that, from what we learned there, we selected 10 of them that seemed to have more activity happening. We went back and did then further one-on-ones. In fact, a group of our team, the group from each municipality, further in-depth study in terms of what they were doing, what they were learning, what was working, what wasn't working, what they were hoping for, and dug into that in a lot more detail. And that provided a great deal of the core information that we had that I'll share with you in a minute. But in addition, we had a formal focus group established of recreation professionals from a number of municipalities around the province. That focus group, we went back to them a number of times over the course of the project, both when we were gathering research, when we were feeding back what we heard to test it against them, and as we began to develop the guide to test the concepts and messages that were in the guide. And so we appreciate all of those who participated. There was a group of elected representatives from a number of different municipalities, different geographic regions, different sizes of municipalities around the province, who again acted as a focus group to us, who we again bounced ideas off us. They gave us a very clear and strong leadership advice as well. And then, as I said before, the project management team from SUMA and SPRA were actively engaged in the project from the beginning in establishing the direction of the project, in participating through the research phases, and as our thinking developed, and then as we began to draft the guide and went through a number of iterations of the guide as it developed over the course of a period of months. They were very actively involved, and those teams involved staff from both SUMA and SPRA. So a great deal of work has gone into it. Here's a quick summary of the research findings. These findings are important because they led to the kind of guide that we created. What we emphasized, what we talked about, the kind of supports and helps that we put in the guide were framed by what we found out during the research. And first, the clear message we got out of the research was that there was a genuine need for assistance in developing collaboration. How to do it is the question. Hard to get a project launched involving 2 or more municipalities. How do you do it? How do you get people around the table? How do you get ideas formed and collaboration and actual activity beginning? The need was there and was voiced everywhere from around the province. Also, that the value of such collaboration and recreation is often not recognized. One of the stumbling blocks is convincing people that investing time and energy in recreation has value, that is critical to a healthy and appealing community, is critical to community growth. Often that message is not recognized. So messaging is part of the challenge that is faced. Related to that is the sense that regional thinking may exist in other areas. They may see lots of regional thinking in terms of fire safety, and you say lots of regional thinking going on in terms of water or wastewater treatment or other areas. You'll know of this from your personal experience. But much tougher to get people to lower the barriers and lower the walls on questions of recreation. Much more turf protection and less regional thinking about that. And that's one of the challenges that elected leaders and professional recreation people face a tough challenge with when they try to say, if we cooperated across our municipal lines, we could do more, but how do we get people to see that as a regional issue and not as a local issue? And so that affected some of the things that are in the guide. We also learned that successful projects really are depending right now on 2 things. One is long-term agreements between municipalities. So you need to have those agreements, but you also need to be able to update them and keep them current. That has become a critical place in areas where successful projects do exist. And they also depend on relationships. Absolutely critical that personal, individual relationships amongst people involved in recreation, amongst elected leaders, exist in order to sustain that. And so that becomes part of what's in the guide. We also found out, unfortunately, that there aren't a whole lot of comprehensive collaboration projects. You can't just go out there and say, we'd like to do it, show us 10 regions of the province where it's just going tickety-boo and everything is fine and perfect. It doesn't exist. Even the municipal areas, municipalities who say, we've got something going here, say, but it's not ideal, it's not what we want, it's a starting place, or it's someplace, it's a holdover that we've had from a generation before and we keep it going, but it's not what it could be. We know there could be a lot more. So we had to then create ideas and approaches that could be used. And finally, no single process for collaboration. There isn't kind of a magic bullet to say, this is how it works, it always works this way, just do these things and it'll come together. Now, you know from real life that we're not likely to find that in any case, but it's very true here. It really depends an awful lot on the region you're within and the municipalities that you're in, what your neighboring municipalities, rural and urban, are, and the environment and the history that you come from. So anything in the guide has to be sound principles and practices, but principles and practices that you can adapt to your particular situation. And we've tried to develop the guide in that way. So before I close and hand this off to my colleagues who will walk you through a little more detail of what's in the guide and how you may use and apply that, let me just really sort of summarize what's in the document quickly. And we really focused on three major components within this document. First was clearly setting out the rationale for recreation developments and for collaboration on the recreation front. Really spelling that argument out well, because that's one of the tough challenges that is out there, is how do you get people to pay attention, to recognize the need, to recognize the value, recognize the logic of investing in recreation and investing in the collaborative intermunicipal process to develop recreation. A second part was then to set up a clear concept for action. What do we do? What are the steps? We'll walk you through this in a minute, but they focused really around three things. One was people. One was the critical nature, to go back to the question I mentioned earlier about the importance of relationships, of linking in the people within your community at the broadest possible link to champions that you could use in the process. The other is to clearly document the benefits, clearly show numerically what will be achieved through collaboration on recreation, so that people see the benefits clearly, and then set up the structure, set up a process, a structured process, so that you can establish the project you want, but also maintain and retain it on a long-term basis. And then finally, the guide at the back has it's probably more than half the guide is dedicated to supports and helps, formats, sample documents, a number of helps that you can use to begin the process of finding those people, getting the structures in place, and moving forward on the project. That's a quick background to it. I'm going to hand it over right now to my colleagues to sort of elaborate a little more on the guide and its application. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Harvey. So I'm going to take an opportunity now to just sort of run through some of the details of the particular guide itself and talk a little bit about the rationale and some of the elements of the guide that I think will be quite useful to municipalities as they begin to start the conversation around intermunicipal collaboration on recreation and looking for sort of answers and direction on how to best handle this. I would say first off, Harvey talked a little bit about SUMA and SPRA came together because we see a need for this. We have municipalities saying we want to start to do recreation collaboration, and we want to look at regional delivery. We want to work with our partners, and we said, okay, well, we need to sort of support those needs and develop a tool that would help them with that. So I would first off make the statement that this isn't a type of document that's like a research project. There isn't a bunch of information that you're going to read and maybe park on a shelf. What we hope the intent of this and what you'll use this document for is a working document that will help to sort of guide you through the process of beginning that conversation, working through a process, and eventually coming up with an agreement on some element of recreation within your part of the province and so on. So first off, some additional rationale. Do you guys hear it pinging in the speakers, or is it just me? That's weird. Okay, I keep getting this feedback from the mic. So beyond sort of just the needs and the asks from the municipalities, part of this was also looking at the growth that Saskatchewan is experiencing right now. And I think this quote from the Saskatchewan Plan for Growth sort of encompasses it quite well in terms of some of the challenges we're having with growth. I mean, growth is positive, but along with that, it creates a sort of a new environment for municipalities, and particularly, referencing, we're seeing more young people living in Saskatchewan, more people moving home, and more people from other countries as well coming to Saskatchewan living here. And with that, they bring a different desire for recreation and different needs, and ultimately, they're starting to put a little bit more strain on the recreational services and programs that we offer in Saskatchewan. And, ultimately, growth is, as I said, it's a positive thing, and it leads to a better quality of life. So with growth, of course, comes change, and families today are experiencing changing the way they think about their communities. They're having higher expectations. They're comparing their lifestyles to other communities in terms of what opportunities exist in community A versus community B. And recreation is just one of those elements of people. One of those elements that people look at when they consider, where do I want to live? Where do I want to raise my family? Where do I want to retire? What are the opportunities there on recreation? And whether or not that's hockey, curling, swimming, golf. We've got cricket pitches now popping up in different communities due to immigration and people coming from other countries who play different sports and so on. So this is an important thing. The unfortunate thing is recreation is a high priority in those decisions about residency. And more our citizens are starting to think and live regionally. You may live in town A, but you're really engaged with people all around your community. Boundaries are becoming less relevant. People are spending more time driving further distances. It's obviously quicker to get there now, but you're engaged in more areas around your community than just simply your home base, and that is having an impact on it. And ultimately, whether you're a rural or an urban family, you're becoming more homogeneous as a population, and they seek the lifestyle, desire, and opportunities they need, and they're looking to municipal councils to lead on that. So the need and opportunity for collaboration. Harvey referenced a few examples around sort of fire service and so on, but going through the research we found, and I know just working with SUMA in different municipalities, there's multiple different examples out there of collaboration that we already see that seem to have no challenges surrounded by them. Fire service is a prime one. Everyone knows that you need access to fire service, whether it be volunteer or full-time. And not every community can afford to have their own fire service, but working together, they can build the capacity they need in order to deliver that service. And we see formal agreements that easily get renewed annually and so on. And that's a prime example, and perhaps there's some very good templates there that we can work off of. Other examples we see around water and wastewater, regional water treatment facilities. We see in transportation, economic development, and regional planning. The unfortunate thing that is quite relevant is that recreation is too often taken for granted when it comes to discussions around regional services. So recreation is a vital need, and as I said, it's not always a priority on the council agenda. And it's not necessarily given a strategic priority in planning for community growth either. We are a growing province. More and more people are moving here. Recreation is a key component of the services we provide to our residents. Now, unfortunately, like everything else within the municipal world, if not given a key priority, not given a key strategic direction, and the conversations aren't happening, certain things start to fall through the cracks, and we have start to see situations of insufficient resources tagged to recreation, inadequate facilities and programs. Hockey rinks facilities starting to crumble. The money's just not there to perhaps build new or rehab those facilities. And communities without those amendments obviously need to retain and attract and retain citizens. So this is why, you know, we're saying recreation is important. We need to start having some serious conversations about it. But in reality, we need to start working together on it as well. Ultimately, recreation, of course, provides the lifestyle and personal opportunities and health that residents are looking for. And you know, later on, you'll see in Norm's presentation, he talks a little bit about, you know, it's not just physical. There's multiple other benefits that are tagged to having a, you know, a robust recreation program within your municipality and within your region. So an opportunity for a greater recreation vision. You know, municipal leadership is important. As I said, you know, it should be giving a strategic perspective. It should be discussed around the council table. There should be a priority placed on recreation. And, you know, when you're working on OCPs, your community plans, you should have a component around recreation. How do we ensure that we're delivering that type of service? And ultimately, you know, municipalities carry the responsibility to think as regionally and collaboratively about recreation as they do other municipal services. As a local government, you are, you know, one of your roles is to provide the services to the residents of your community, whether that be water, wastewater, policing, fire, and recreation falls within that offering. So it's an important one to have consideration for. And ultimately, like everything else, you know, it requires a strong vision from council. People are looking to their municipal councils to provide leadership on that. The last session I gave the example, it's around doctor recruitment. Municipalities have no responsibility when it comes to healthcare related things. We're not mandated to be involved in healthcare related matters, but on many occasions, we have situations where there's challenges around having doctors in your community. So members of those communities go to the local council as the first order of government that they, you know, feel most close to, and ask those orders of government to say, you know what, we want you to do something about doctor recruitment, and we want you to become engaged. And so what I'm saying here is, you know, councils have taken the vision and taken leadership to participate in those types of initiatives. Recreation should be on that agenda as well. It's an important component of the services you provide and adds value to your community and enhances the quality of life of your residents. So let's deal a little bit around sort of taking action. So these are some of the elements that are shared within the guide itself. I'm sort of doing a very high-level overview of it. It goes a little bit more in detail in terms of the type of information and work that you need to do through this. But some of the principles around the foundation of this recreation collaboration is, you know, a consistent leadership. You know, champions from your community. You need to find those people within your town, your village, your resort village, wherever it is that you live, those people who are really passionate about recreation, passionate about their community involvement, and what I would coin as sort of the champions. These are the people who are willing to put blood, sweat, and tears into any initiative, and these are the type of people that will help you sort of push through this type of project. You need a commitment to collaboration. You need to say, you know, we need to work together as a team. You know, competition's great, but ultimately, if we want to achieve our goal, we need to set those competitions, you know, that competition mindset aside, break down those boundaries, and be prepared to work together as best as we can, because ultimately, collaboration will end in a positive end game. So. Building relationships. You know, relationships are key. Harvey mentioned about that in terms of what we saw with some current agreements that exist. Relationships have helped to facilitate a lot of these agreements and have helped to maintain their longevity into the future. Identifying some of the mutual benefits as you start to go through the process of talking about collaboration. You need to start having those conversations with your municipalities, your neighbors around you about what those mutual benefits are and how you can work together on that. And then, of course, you know, volunteers. You need to realize that, you know, although as a municipal council, you're looked at by your residents as sort of being the leadership and providing the vision in order to fulfill this initiative, but at the same point in time, there's a lot of volunteers, there's a lot of people out there, as I said, who are already passionate about this. They have the energy. You need to bring them into the fray, build off of their energy, and ask them to participate in this as well. So the process. So as Harvey said, there's really not one process that's going to answer, you know, solve all your problems. But what we're proposing in here is a process that we think on the surface should work quite well for you. Ultimately, as a local council, you can modify whatever process you want. But we're saying this is a strong process that we're confident will lead you down the right direction. So the first off being sort of your current situation, reviewing your situation, what are the challenges? You understand recreation is important. What are the barriers? What are some of the challenges you're facing on recreation, on social activities, whether it be infrastructure challenges, programming, capacity, the ability to attract people to participate in those recreation programs. You need to start having that conversation and understanding what those challenges are. You need to start planning for that collaboration, as I said before, finding those people who are engaged in this, who have the passion, who have the energy. These are the people that are going to help you in the long term. This is an exercise that isn't something that you're thinking, over the next year we'll strike an agreement. These are the types of agreements you want to have in place that outlast you and perhaps your children and your grandchildren. These are the types of things, agreements that are important to the long-term sustainability of municipalities. We see agreements that are out there. The unfortunate thing is a lot of them aren't long-term. They're just sort of gentleman handshakes or agreements written on a napkin, the types of thing that could be taken away at any point in time. What we're encouraging you here to do is to try to establish relationships and build that network and be able to build an agreement that has a long-lasting effect. In terms of the overall process, build sort of that structured process. This is a little bit about being transparent to your municipal citizens and residents. And, if as you start to begin this process, have it clearly laid out in terms of what your initial starts are, the types of engagement you're going to have, and what your ultimate goal is. It's important to have that structure. People will understand. They'll be able to clearly, see what your vision is as a council as you move forward on the recreation side of things. When we started doing this project, I did some tours around the province just on SUMA regional meetings, and often I got sort of the comment, is this not just a guide that you're creating in terms of telling how urbans how to get money out of RMs for recreation? And I would say the answer is no to that. On regional collaboration on recreation, it's about urbans working with urbans working with RMs, and vice versa. It's all over the board, engaging First Nations communities and so on. But part of that, before you start to have those conversations with those communities, you need to start to build your rationale for why you want to join in a partnership, why you want to collaborate with these communities. So start to build some of that data, build that evidence-based argument as to why they should join you. Start looking at the users of the facilities, what your actual costs are. A lot of municipalities, you've all got asset registers, you know what the age of a lot of your infrastructure is, you know what it's going to cost to rehab, you know what it's going to cost to build. This is the type of information you need to collect and build upon before you go to the table, before you start those conversations. It's just not as simple as going to the town down the road or the RM and saying, your people come into our town, they use their hawk ring, you should pay up and give us some money. That's not going to work. But if you build a fact-based approach to it, build that argument, I think you're going to go down a far better path in being able to establish agreement that's going to work. So this is a graphical representation of sort of that process. I think it shows, for us visual learners out there, what we're really talking about. So a little bit about, Part A, your current situation. Take that environmental scan, see what your current situation is with respect to, what some of your challenges are, what your priorities are, where you want to go. Then there's sort of the planning for collaboration process. What's the people, process, and information. Engaging those people, the champions of your community, the leaders, the ones who are passionate about recreation, starting to collect that data. What is the information you need in order to start that conversation, to go down that path of trying to strike an agreement, and then creating a collaborative leadership structure or process in place. Structure is important. This will help you sort of guide through the overall, initiative that you have. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to take a long time. With data collection, with the conversations, with the public engagements, the conversations you're going to have with other municipalities. This isn't going to happen overnight. So you need to have that structure in place and be able to maintain that collaborative relationship going forward. And then last, hopefully through all of this, you come out in the end with some shared solutions around facilities and programs and other initiatives, things that are the priority of not only your community, perhaps the ARM, or even a larger region around in terms of what your shared benefits are in the end. So that's where I stop, and that's where Norm comes up to talk a little bit about SPRA and some of the supports they can provide in this project. But I'll say again, it's the guide will be available tomorrow at the SPRA booth, booth 108. I would encourage you to go pick one up. We will be sort of documenting which communities take them, because I think in the long run we'd like to sort of measure which communities have taken the document and which ones have started to use it to facilitate a plan and to put a plan in place on regional collaboration. So with that, I will turn it over to Norm.
Thanks, Sean. As we've been going through the presentations, I think it becomes fairly clear that whatever happens has to be community-driven. It can't be someone coming in and say, oh, you got to do this, you got to do this. So it's got to be community-driven. There has to be something in the community that says, you know, this is important to us, we have to move forward. But that doesn't mean there can't be or there shouldn't be some support for communities to do that. And what I'd like to do in just a few minutes, I want to talk about the support that's available through SUMA, through SPRA, and through some of the sport, culture, and recreation districts on if a community is looking at doing something in intermunicipal recreation, what kind of tools are out there that maybe could help you. But before I get to that, there is one thing I do have to go through. There's a couple slides that we do have to talk about. We talked about what is the benefit of doing this. And if it's looked at in a community as just a monetary kind of thing, you've got money, I'd like some, let's partner, it doesn't work. It's got to be both mutually beneficial to all organizations that are involved. And to just give you an idea of what that means, I wanted to briefly go through some of the benefits. And this is not something that just came out of my head. This has been research that's been done over the last 10 to 15 years about what are the actual benefits of recreation to communities. And the thing that's important about this is when we say recreation, we're talking sports, we're talking culture, we're talking anything people do in your community that is enjoyable, that is positive to the community and positive to themselves. So it's a whole gambit of kind of things, and it takes in a lot of various areas. The physical activity obviously is one of those physical well-being things that everyone understands. If you go out and exercise, you're better for it. You're better physically, physiologically. Everything you do around physical activity is good for you. One of the things that people don't understand as well, though, is the fact that your mental well-being is also directly connected to what you do not only in recreation but in sport and culture. If you are actively involved in recreation programs, it has been proven that you are actually in a better mental state. There's less depression, and the big one is that there's less incidence of suicide. And there's also been, we talk about after-school recreation, and sometimes there's been studies showing that right now in a lot of communities, when there's no parental supervision after school, highest rates of crime and teenage pregnancies occur. So we have to find and realize that there are a lot of good benefits to recreation, not only from a physical, but from a mental well-being perspective as well. The social benefits, less vandalism, people are less depressed, and one of the things that are really coming out now is if we have new Canadians coming into our communities, they are actually getting more climatized, more oriented to your communities if you can involve them in some kind of recreation activity. It's because it's non-threatening. It's something they want to do, they feel part of the community, and they start to realize, hey, this is where I belong, this is where I can be a part of. Quality of life was already mentioned. I won't go into that, but it does hit the province's going forward plan, and it does actually show that if somebody has a great recreation experience, they're more likely to stay in your community, and they're more likely to move to their community if there's something for their kids and their spouses to do. Economic generator I talked about, I'll just talk about it briefly. Jobs, obviously. If you live in larger centers and you live near a park, the value of your property goes up. Yeah, so and there's all kinds of benefits through there. The community connectivity and attachment, though, is probably a really important one for a community. I cannot think of another department or ministry or whatever you want to call it within a community where there is that much citizen engagement. When you take a look at your recreation programs and services that are offered by your municipality, where do you get more engagement than those people that are volunteering at the rink, they're volunteering to coach, they're volunteering to offer classes to kids? No other service that you provide has that engagement. So what does that engagement mean to you as a community? It means that those people feel a part of your community, they're connected to your community is healthier, and your community is better off because you have those people that are actually volunteering and being a part of what is happening in your municipality. And finally, this one is just brand new, well, fairly new. It's community resiliency, and it was actually something that a Saskatchewan native, Dr. Jacqueline Onescu out of Limerick did. She did a lot of research into community resiliency. And she's found that a lot of smaller communities in Saskatchewan are very resilient, and they have to be. As things change, they have to do things differently in order to continue on. And what she made the very strong link to was the community's resiliency is actually directly connected in a lot of ways to what they do on a recreation basis. If you get citizens participating and volunteering in your community, they are more likely to come to the forefront when you need them. So here's some of the benefits that are there for intermunicipal recreation. It's going forward and not saying, hey, I'd like to have some of your money. It's going forward and, hey, did you realize we can benefit from recreation services if we all work together, and all our citizens can benefit from this? So what's happening out there? Well, there's a number of different areas that are working, and as Harvey said, a lot of this is informal, but it is happening in little places, and I'll give you some examples. But first of all, programs and services are huge. This is where a lot of people are sharing. If you've got someone who's a qualified fitness leader, and I'm going to give a shameless plug for SPRA's fitness program. We do train fitness leaders, but let's say you've got a trained fitness person, someone else has got a community hall that happens to be vacant or some pockets of interest. You can start to develop programs that isn't just for one community, but is for a number of communities. Same as a playground program. You may have playground leaders that are trained through High Five or through the Playground Leadership Program, and what they will then do is they will actually have a rotating playground or a traveling playground where they'll go into communities on Tuesdays and Thursdays, another community Mondays and Wednesdays. And it's that kind of sharing of programs and services that we're finding is happening throughout the province. Operations, I think we've got some, I'll give you some examples in just a bit, where actual communities are sharing the cost of operations, especially of recreation facilities and departments, understanding that there is a lot of cost in operating some of these facilities, and there are a lot of people benefiting, so there should be shared cost of operations. Critical mass is a huge one. A lot of times we just don't have the population to get things done. So let's take a look at our hockey teams. Where we used to have 3 or 4 hockey teams, we don't have as many kids or what have you, so we're starting to combine, and we're starting to get that critical mass we need. It also happens in dinner theaters. It happens in cultural activities. People need to start to share that critical mass so they can actually offer programs that benefit everyone. Capital construction is pretty straightforward. A lot of cases of grants where you actually share your per capita or you give money to help build or retrofit a municipal facility. Staffing is a big one that is actually starting to become more and more popular. People are realizing that to operate recreation programs, you do need trained professionals to do that, whether it's a rec director or whether it's the person that runs your rink or whether it's someone who's doing your playground program or leadership development for kids. They're starting to realize that you need someone who's trained to do that, you need someone who's got the education and the experience. So they're starting to share recreation professionals across the province. So here's some specific promising practices, things that are happening out there. I'd like to mention the town of Eston and the arm of Snipe Lake. They are actually doing some really good work around sharing the cost of recreation, and the fact that they share the cost of the rec director, and they share some of the facilities and things like that. They've got a bylaw that they've taken a look at. Both organizations or both municipalities have signed the bylaw, and they sit on a joint rec board together. So that's a real good example of some of the things that are happening in the rec director area. RM's allocating portion of tax base to towns. This doesn't happen across the province, but a very good example of where it is happening is in the RM of Frenchman Butte and Paradise Hills, St. Walburg, Turtleford, and the Hutterite colony of Fort Pitt Farms Incorporated. And what happens is the RM takes part of their tax base, and then they say, hey, you know what, I realize we are using some of the services of those communities, and we need to share it with you. So they had come up with a formula that gives a base amount, and then based on population and houses and schooling and all that, they've come up with an idea of each year they give a certain amount of money to the municipalities that provide those services for them. Another good example of things that are happening is joint operation of regional parks. In a lot of cases, regional parks are the center of our recreational activities, especially in the summertime. A lot of them are the places where we have our pools. Down in Radville, in the RM of Laurier and the Regional Park of Laurier, they've got a pretty good system working where, in a lot of cases, the regional park actually owns the facilities. They share the cost of operations, they share the cost of capital, they've just redone their bylaws, and they actually have a joint rec board. The per capita piece up there, I think everybody's familiar with that. Sometimes with grants, you don't have enough population, so you share it with someone else. The other one that's up there is the Recreation Foundation. This was kind of a cool one, if agreements could be cool. But this is kind of a neat one, I guess, is the fact that the municipalities of Rosetown and the arm of St. Andrews, the arm of Pleasant Valley, Marriott, and the arm of Mountain View got together and created a separate entity, which is a foundation. And the responsibility of that foundation is they get money from each of those municipalities, they put it all together, and then they adjudicate grants. So once a year, they'll ask those municipalities and people in those municipalities to submit their grants, and they'll adjudicate it. And although mostly it's capital for equipment, maybe it's AED equipment, or maybe it's some curling stones or something, it could be used for programming. But it's kind of a different way of recognizing, you know what, it's not a one-size-fits-all. There's a whole pile of things out there that people are thinking out of the box and can do. And there's a number of other ones here. There's the Christopher Lake and Village of Paddockwood and the arm of Paddockwood getting together and doing some services. There's the town of Wynyards doing some stuff with Elfrost and Big Quill. And there's a whole other series of examples that I can share with you. I just don't want to do it right now because we don't have all the time. So when you take a look at the last one there is the expertise. Again, it's not formalized, but I know when I worked with the city of Moose Jaw, one of the things that we used to do, we'd get on all kinds of calls from small towns and saying, hey, can you help me with this? I'm putting my ice in, and I've got foam in my brine line. What should I do? You'd help them out. I mean, like, why not? But later on, it paid dividends because if I needed some bleachers, I could call them and say, hey, I've got a big slow pitch tournament. I need some bleachers. Can you help me out? And they'd be more than happy to. So it's that kind of reciprocal stuff that if we can start to build on an intermunicipal basis, we can start to build some long-term informal agreements. So what support's out there? SUMA has some support, obviously. They have been actually very good partners to work with and really recognize the need for quality recreation services throughout the province. There's a Municipal Capacity Development Program, which is a partnership between SUMA, SARM, and Government Relations. And it actually is a program to work with municipal leaders and trying to get intermunicipal projects going. And Sean's here, and he'd be happy to talk to you more about that and the other services of SUMA. I'm not a real pro on the services of SUMA, but Sean is, so afterwards please come up and talk to him about the kind of things that you can, the support you can get from SUMA. From SPRA's perspective, I can speak a little bit on that because I do work for them. And one of the things we really believe strongly in is if we want to give support, like this manual, and we want to give support in some of the other manuals I'm going to talk to you about, you should also have someone there to help you out. And we're fortunate enough to be able to have 7 field staff across the province. So we're a member-based organization. We have about 400 members in about 253 of them are municipalities. And then we've got strategically located field staff, and Jacqueline and Rob are down here, and if you have any questions later, they'll be able to help you out. They actually have the business cards of everybody across the province, so if you're wondering who's in your area, please come up and see them, and they'll make sure that you hook up with them. We've got offices in Larange, offices in Prince Albert, Rosetown, Swift Current, Weyburn, Yorkton, Humboldt, and I think that's all of them. I didn't miss anybody, did I? So if you're in that area, you'll see the boundaries there. Please take advantage of the services we have to offer. The people that are the field staff are former recreation directors. Every single one of them has worked in a town in Saskatchewan, and they have all talked about or worked with councils, hockey boards, figure skating boards, cultural boards. They've worked with other municipalities, they've run rinks, they've run pools, so they're very well qualified to help you out. If you need to know anything, those would be the guys you want to talk to because they've got a wealth of information and they can share it with you. So we talked a little bit earlier about, okay, you got to find out what you need. You got to find out as a community or as a series of communities, where do you really want to go? What do you want to share on? There's a tool, again, that our field staff can help you out with. There's a tool that is actually an evaluation tool that will sit you down and with a community or with a committee and say, okay, what do you got? It shows you some good policies, it shows you some good planning processes, it'll help you identify your priorities and some strategies, and it'll help identify some action plans for you to move forward. So how does it work? It's community-led. Again, big on the fact that it's got to come from the community. If it doesn't come from the community, it's not worthwhile really pursuing because the community has to be involved and has to lead the whole process. But there's 10 competencies and 88 practice guidelines, and you go, oh yeah, are you kidding me? I don't have time to go through all that. Agreed. We'd like you to. We think it's valuable if you went through them all, but in a lot of cases, you don't have all the big parks that they may be talking about. You don't have some of the things. But what you do have is maybe some programs, or what you do have is some facilities. And if you want to go through a process that says, what have I got in my facilities? What do I need in my facilities? This is a very good process where they take the best practices and say, do you have safety guidelines? Do you have qualified people? Do you check your compressors? They go through a series of kind of things that says, do you do this? You answer them, not only in facilities, but you can do it in program service arrangements as well. And you answer them and you find out, you know what, I'm pretty good at this. Ooh, boy, maybe I suck at that, right? And then if the other communities are going through this at the same time, and we can certainly work that out if we can with everybody going through it together, then we start to see this community is really good at this. This community is not so good at this, but I'm good at this. And then you start to really identify those areas of need that we talked about earlier. And then once you're done, there's an action guide. And again, our field staff will walk you through it. There's an action guide that says, now that you've done this, here's what you should be doing. Yes! There is absolutely no cost. A lot of these things we're talking about, the guide that we worked with SUMA on, the cost of this, there's no cost, and there's some other things we'll have. It's something, it's a support mechanism that both SUMA and us, when we talk, is we've for a long time said, well, here's a handbook, away you go, have at her. You know, who's got the time sometimes to go through the entire handbook? Wouldn't it be nice to have someone help you walk through it and identify where the areas are? So there is no cost for that. That was kind of a long, no, there's no cost, wasn't it? And then at the end I mentioned that we have field staff and they can do whatever you want. You don't have to use them, but if you want them to be your coach or your moderator, or if you want them to be your trainer or just a sympathetic ear, they're more than welcome to do that, and they're more than happy to do that. It's community-led and driven, and you have to decide where you want to go with it. The next one that's out there is Rec Board Development Manuals, and this is an extremely important and integral part of what you're doing on intermunicipal recreation. If you don't know what you're doing in your own community, you don't know what the roles and responsibilities are, how can you share with somebody what you want to do and how you want to do it? This is an extremely important piece because it gives you a solid base to move forward on. The problem is, and it's a kind of a weird problem, is the fact they've been around for 50 years. Now, they've been extremely useful. They were set up over 50 years ago, and there was over 700 of them in 700 different communities, all have rec board bylaws. Over time, however, they've kind of evolved, and they should, but the problem is there's probably 699 different models of rec boards out there. And it's important that they be for your community, that they work for your community, but at the same time it's important to realize that sometimes that history of who put the rec board bylaws together, they're not around anymore, and they've started to evolve, and if they haven't been given the attention they deserve, you could be at a bit of a risk. So what we've found, we spent 2 years going through all the bylaws we could find and developing this manual, and what we found, there's a lot of boards and there's a lot of councils that aren't totally aware of all the roles and responsibilities and what's actually in their bylaws. Some are perfect, some got it nailed, some are doing very well. Some don't know. Some don't know who's responsible for collecting rental fees. Where does the money go? How is it taken care of? And it's important that they do know. So if you're unaware of your duties and responsibilities, maybe it's time to actually say, you know what, let's walk through it and figure out who's responsible for what, who's taking the money and what are they doing with it, who's running the rinks, are they qualified, that kind of thing. Environments have been changing, so we need to update our bylaws. There's nothing there that's new, but you do have to mitigate your risk, and there may be some insurance problems if you're not following your bylaws, okay? Again, one of the challenges and one of the beautiful things about recreation is there's so much community engagement. People have no problem taking it and running with it. But at the same time, you do have to say, hey, come on, you know, there's some rules here. So we ought to make sure that we're mitigating our risk and there's no insurance problems. And besides, you know, it's just sound administrative practices to make sure that every once in a while you take a look at some of your bylaws, specifically the recreation ones. So in the manual itself, I'll go through the benefits that I just went through with you, so I won't go through them again, obviously. Talk about why is there a rec board. We'll talk about the legislation that's out there. If you have a rec board, you should be aware of the legislation that's there, and it's in the Cities Act, it's in the Municipalities Act, it's also in the Northern Municipalities Act. It talks about the insurance things you have to look out for. Specifically talks about a lot of the roles and responsibilities. Whose role is it to take care of the rink? Who's responsible if something happens? Well, generally it's council. And are you covered for that? And are your volunteers covered for that? And are your staff covered for that? So please have a good look at your roles and responsibilities. And again, I'll talk about the launch of this in just a second, but we have staff available that can walk you through all that. It'll give you an actionable assessment. And hopefully everybody in this room will have an assessment that says, I'm great, I'm doing everything I need to do, and you're fine. But I bet there may be one or two that aren't in that situation, so it'll give you an assessment of where you really have to look at. It gives you community reviews, so it'll review your community and give you some assets. It talks about your mission and vision. So if you're trying to work with another organization or another municipality, nice to have the same vision. Where do you want to go? You may be talking, let's get our youth going, we'll do youth development. The other community may be talking, yeah, let's build some rinks. Well, no, you have to be on the same page. So you have to have the same vision, the same understanding of where you want to go in order for you to get there. Talks about how to form a rec board and gives you some models. And this is the really cool one. We've taken about, like I said, there's about 700 different rec boards out there. We've taken as many of them as we could find, and we've kind of distilled it down to 6 to 8 basic rec boards. Now, obviously, you take those and you make them work for your community. But we've taken a look at the best practices that we've been able to identify out there, and there'll be different models like, do you want it to be an operating board or an advisory board? Do you want it to be a local board, or do you want it to be a more intermunicipal board? Do you have a rec director or a rec professional, or do you not? And there's all those kind of things. And you answer the questions, and then we'll lead you through a process that says, okay, we want to move forward, and here's how we want to move forward in these areas. Lastly, on this one there is a whack of templates, and I don't want to scare you off, but there's over 100 pages of templates and samples. And that is not something you have to go through every page, but what it is, we will have our staff there with you, and if you're looking for a good sample of a good bylaw, not only do we have some fantastic ones in the manual we're launching today, but there are some other ones also in these manuals. There's sample letters, there's sample visioning exercises, there's samples and just about anything. You don't have to go through them all. We'll have people there that will help you, but at least you can start to see what is there, and you don't have to create it yourself, although you do have to look at it, make sure it meets the needs of your communities, and change it accordingly. So that's that one, and like I said earlier, I should go back there, I guess just on the bottom there, the SPRA field staff and district staff. We're not launching this one today. It's going to be launched a little bit later. We've got the manual done. It's all been approved. Now we're actually training not only our staff, but the staff from the sport, culture, and recreation districts that are across the province. We're training them as well. And we're doing that in mid-February, mid to end February. And then we're actually identifying 3 pilot projects where we're going out in communities, walking them through this process and saying, hey, does this work for you? And they'll say, well, they'll say yes. No, they may say no, or here's where you have to approve it and that kind of thing. And then we'll make those revisions and then be ready to go out to the communities that are interested late June, I'd say July and August, but we all know that's probably not the best time. So, September, where we could actually get out and send our field staff and some of the district staff out to give you a hand. So we won't be able to give you that manual because we don't want to give a manual of that size and that complexity to communities unless it goes with some training as well, unless we can lead you through it. There's a similar one, First Nation rec boards. I won't go through this one, but it's basically the same idea. It goes through the whole bylaws purpose, but it does have a First Nation focus. And again, there's SPRA field staff and district staff that will be available to help you out. The last one I want to talk about is the toolkit for hiring a recreation professional. This is another tool that can help you if you're looking at intermunicipal recreation or just internal recreation. A lot of cases, they are now taking recreation professionals, recreation directors, if you want to call them that, and sharing them. They're finding there is enough intricacies in some of the legislation and some of the operations that volunteers can't do it all anymore. We do need to have some trained professionals do it, and these people are trained, they've got experience, and they're actually saying, hey, let's share the cost of this so we can get our leadership going, development going, we can get our facilities operated. And we've got a toolkit that will help you decide, hey, do you actually need one of these people, or are you okay the way you are? It takes you into planning, takes you into job description development. The other things that are in the toolkit are recruiting practices. How do you recruit these guys? Where do the guys or gals, where do they come from? Do we still send out letters, or do we still send out ads in the paper? We're finding not the best way to do it anymore. A lot of rec professionals now know the websites that they want to go to that have quality notifications there of good jobs. So you need to know who those are and where they are so that when you're asking for someone to apply for a job, you know where to head. Talks about screening and interviewing processes. How do you screen the applicants? What are some good interview questions? Who should be involved in the interview? Also talks about how to do reference checks and how to do job offers. When you offer someone a job, what do you have to tell them? And how should you tell them, and what's the legislation, not only around the Cities Act and stuff, but also some HR stuff as well. It talks about you need to give them orientation. This is particularly important if you're sharing a professional with another municipality. Orientate them to the municipalities and give them ongoing support. And finally, again, there's a whack of templates and samples in there that you can take a look at, maybe mold to your own local environment, and hopefully work with them. There are some support services. Again, the SPRA field staff, the Saskatchewan Association of Recreation Professionals will also provide support, and the district staff that are out there will also provide support as well. I guess in closing, what I would like to say, I just want to, oops, sorry, went backwards, just want to show you some of the contacts. Of course, there's SUMA and all the good work they do. Talked about the fact that you can get a lot of the stuff at our trade show booth at booth 108. And actually in that trade show booth you can get the guide that we talk about today, and that's the Intermunicipal Recreation Guide. There's also the Rec Director Toolkit. There's also the Aboriginal Recreation Board Development and a whack of other things. So please go to the booth and talk to our field staff that are there. And as I mentioned, we've got Jacqueline and Rob here. If you want more information about your specific area, they can certainly help you out. And in closing, I would like to say thank you to Harvey for all his hard work on behalf of both SPRA and SUMA in doing the research. And I really want to right now give kudos to SUMA. They've really come forward and said, you know what, recreation is important. It's important to our communities. It's important to our quality of life. And I'm not sure that we could find a better partner. So thank you very much to SUMA, and thank you very much to all of you for listening.
Wow, thanks a lot, gentlemen. What an awful lot of information that's been coming to you from this point. The positive outcomes of these types of sessions are input from you, the audience, as well. So now's the opportunity for you to ask questions of either of these gentlemen that have been good enough to come here and give us all kinds of information that's very valuable. I sense that it's tweaked the interest of a number of people here. And if I may just refer back to what was spoken about attracting people or keeping people in your community. I recall some of the sessions, and perhaps you have been in some of the sessions, on how to recruit and retain physicians. Recall any of that? Part and parcel of that is the recreation, the community, the welcoming, and the participation and involvement of the newcomers to our community. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, once again, I just remind you, if you have a question, please use the microphone, speak into it, identify yourselves, and please pose the question. These gentlemen will be more than happy to address and respond. So please.
Questions?
One of the more important things, I think, is how do we get a hold of you to get more help if we need it, type of thing. But beyond that, are there any questions to clarify some of the information? There's an awful lot of great information, by the way. Is there anything you'd like to just pick out as elaborate on, or?
Perhaps, Ron, one question I can ask of the crowd, because I know in our last session we had a couple people who were excited to talk about that, and I guess is your own experience right now, just through a show of hands, how many communities currently have an agreement with another municipality on recreation, and how many perhaps are starting the planning or want to go down that path? Okay. All right, how many have an agreement right now? So you got a handful, okay? And how many want to start? So we got a good room. Okay, so how about the people who have an agreement? Tell us a little bit about your experience, some of the challenges or positive elements of that agreement.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
It's not really, Bob Pimbolt, Mayor of Assiniboia. I just wanted to ask, we're in the process of building a new arena, and I was wondering, do you see anything in the future as far as support grants for capital projects under recreation?
Yeah, there's nothing firm. I mean, I know that right now there's some conversations going on about infrastructure across the province and across the country. what happens in a lot of cases, infrastructure is not only restricted, obviously, to recreation facilities. There's the water, there's just everything. So it's a matter of, I know there's conversations about it, I know people are saying we should be doing it, and I know FCM, I guess, is working with some of the organizations that I work with across the country to take a look at the value of recreation facilities, but there is nothing that I am aware of that is coming out. I mean, we're... and lobby's a bad word. So we're really working hard to try and get that message across, but there are a lot of other disciplines and other facilities that are important as well. So I don't know of anything right now.
I'll add to the comment, of course, you're familiar with the New Building Canada fund that's out right now and the little amount of money that is available there. And, you know, one of the details a lot of people aren't aware of is recreation cannot be a part of the Building Canada fund, right? However, you do have the opportunity to use your gas tax funds, probably not a tremendous amount of money there, but that at this stage of the game is the only available. In terms of the broader, you know, picture around infrastructure, we know the situation that it is right now. I wouldn't expect any additional money coming anytime soon. So it's an unfortunate situation, but.
Thanks, Sean. Next.
Yes, my name is Winston Bailey. I'm City Councillor of the City of Weyburn. The City of Weyburn is in partnership with Nickel Lake Regional Park, and we do support that, and I represent that committee. One of our biggest challenges with our regional park there, first of all, is a share of funding, and the regional parks share within provincial parks jurisdiction with the province. But one of the things that we struggle with every year, when we open our park in the 15th of May, we always have a new representative from the provincial government that wants us each and every year to reinvent the wheel for safety reasons, for new things, and it's an ongoing battle just about every year. We deal with water, which our water supply is city water. We deal with our facilities as our play structures, our paddling pool, and we never can get consistency from year to year with personnel representing the city. Safety is very important, don't get me wrong, but the added costs that we've been implemented with over the last year, let me use an example, our paddling pool, which is less than 2 feet deep. Now we've had to fence it, now we have to man it. We got away without supplying a licensed lifeguard just to supervision, and a whole lot of other things that come up. And I know last year our budget increased just to have that paddling pool fenced and supervised was about a $20,000 expenditure for us, where if the kids run another 50 feet, they're in the lake. Frustration, I guess, is what I'm saying on some of this. Is there, how can we get a unified consistency from year to year what we're required to have in our parks?
And you're saying from the perspective of the provincial's
Yes.
government's requirements? What it sounds to me that you're probably running into every year is a situation of almost downloading of certain responsibilities. So much like everything else we see in the municipal sector, whether it be landfills or whatever, you know, you have the other order of government coming in and imposing another sort of legislative obligation on top of you without, I'm going to take a wild guess. When they come in, they don't give you any money for any of these changes, right?
You got it.
Yeah, okay. So I mean, it's another example of downloading from another order of government onto, you know, local governments as well. So I mean, the best I can suggest to you is, you know, connect with, you know, the Minister of Parks and Culture is going to be here today, this week. Corner him, have a conversation with him, express your concerns around sort of the consistency in terms of staff and also the consistency in terms of application of legislation. And I mean, from our perspective, we have an opportunity to perhaps engage with them as well and have a conversation around, we continually have conversations around downloading and the various different things that occur, and obviously this is another example. So.
We have gone that step, and it has helped somewhat, but we still seem to be frustrated.
You should talk to the SUMA president and tell her to do something about it.
Thank you.
Right, you're right on. And that's a reality. It's the public health and safety. When you have paddling pools, splash parks, and so on, all of a sudden these are great, and it's part of the recreation. And then suddenly you have to have someone looking after it, you have to have the water tested every so on, and on. I'm sorry, next question, please.
You asked who had agreements, and my name is Lori Reese, and I'm from the town of Eston. And we have, if you're thinking about trying to get an agreement with another municipality, I strongly recommend it, because we have a long-standing agreement with the RM of Snipe Lake for our recreation. We cost share operations, with the town paying approximately 60% of operations, and the RM provides an operating grant that at one point was 40%. Now it's give or take 40%. Capital expenditures for recreation are 50-50. We have the bylaw that Norm mentioned. We have a 9-person or 10-person recreation board, 4 members from the RM, 4 members from the town, 1 person from the school. We also now, because the Lions Club has put so much money into our recreation program, we also have a Lions member now on our recreation board. So the more you can get into the situation of an agreement with another municipality, the easier it is on your, rather than one municipality trying to do it. And if you can get it worked out and get it in writing and get it long-standing, ours has been long-standing, and we have an excellent working relationship with the other municipality. We have joint council meetings with them twice a year, and it's excellent.
And I hear you got a pretty tough mayor, too.
Big bird.
Right, yes. I would add a comment. It's a perfect example in terms of the components of relationships and then also engaging the community. So as you already said, you have a long-term working relationship with that RM and with other community members, and that's a strength to that agreement. I think the other element of that too is you've seen community engagement as well. So recognizing the Lions being a contributor, saying, you know, come join in and be part of the governance structure and decision making, which I think is vital, right? Too often we've seen agreements where, you know, an urban goes out and says, you know, we want to get money, they get money, but when that other municipality comes in and says, oh, we want to have a partake in some of the decisions, whoa, wait, no, that's too much now. We just wanted your money, right? And clearly that's a problem. So the direction you're going, I think, is very positive.
I think the other thing on that too is it's a great example, and there are other examples around the province as well. And if you're in a community that want to learn from that, we've found a lot of times communities love to show the kind of stuff they're doing and how they've been successful. So it's just a matter of getting people to get in touch with them, and that's one thing that's good about Saskatchewan is we don't mind sharing at all. So that's the kind of stuff that if you're looking for somebody in your area that might be sharing, get a hold of SUMA or get a hold of our field staff, and they'll certainly try and set you up something so that you can learn from each other, and that's usually the best way of doing it.
But we need a rec director.
Okay.
I just want to talk a little bit more about this guide. Is one element that I didn't go into too much detail in the presentation, and perhaps this is an opportunity to talk about it. Harvey had mentioned that you know, the first few pages is really about the foundation of the work that we did, and really the majority of the document is templates and tools to help you sort of guide yourself through that process. This document will not only be available hard copy tomorrow at trade show, but it'll also be electronically on SPRA's site and SUMA's. And part of it is all the templates will be in Word form as well. So you have the ability to download them and adjust them as you see fit. You'll see they're in the document itself, and they're formatted to fit in this book. But when you go back to your communities, you have the ability to alter them as you want to be able to use them. You know, there's tools in there in terms of questions asked and community engagements, council engagements. There's a work plan structure framework. You know, going back to my presentation talking about the importance of that structure, the work plan will provide some of that structure. And there's an agreement in there. There's a sample budget of various different arrangements that have already been made between different municipalities. So.
Awesome. Any other questions or comments or shared experiences?
Of the people who do have agreements, the one question I always find interesting is, are they simply funding agreements, like money transferred? Would you say that's what it is? Yes? No? Yes? What are some examples in terms of funding agreements? I know there's some communities that will get like $1,000 a year, and others that'll get up to $50,000 a year. Interesting enough, I think if you look at the guide, the example we provided, the municipal budget and funding arrangements, it's almost like $250,000 the two municipalities cost share upon. So I'm just intrigued to know sort of what the environment is out there. Is anyone willing to share that? No?
There could in fact be in some areas
Our
recreation boards.
recreation budget is around $200,000 a year.
Are there any parks and rec boards that are in existence in some of the communities that share with membership from adjacent jurisdictions? Perhaps that's what Sean was looking. Well,
I think we're
looks
done.
like we're anxious to get out of here by the looks of it. So, ladies and gentlemen, before you do, I want to sincerely thank the folks here from Saskatchewan Parks and Recreation Association. Thank you, Mike Powell, very much as president. Mr. Harvey Lennon. These people are all valuable resources and supporters of what we are trying to do. Norm Campbell, you did an excellent presentation, and I'm sure you can look forward to hearing from some of these folks. And as always, Sean McEachran, as I said, our policy member from SUMA, is always there to help. We're always there for you. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very kindly. Please help me thank these gentlemen as well. Enjoy your evening.
Yes, it is. Have a safe trip home.
Hey, how you doing? I thought I saw you there. How are things? Good.
Good.
Somebody driving. Hey, well, that's it. Yeah, I'm going to take it on to the next place.